kick off the webinar just in a brief minute. We're going to be looking at the top 5 contact center strategies, and that is a follow-up from last week's, from 3 weeks ago when we looked at the top 10. So we went from 10 down to 5. And on our agenda, I'm John Pierce. I'm the editor of Call Center Helper, and I'll be dealing the introductions and acting as master of ceremonies today, and delighted to be joined by 2 very well-respected, very well-experienced professionals in the business. Paul Cooper, customer experience expert, and from joining us today, and also Mike Murphy, technology expert from Interactive Intelligence. So Paul and Mike, welcome.
Oh, very good to be here.
Thank you, Jotty. Yes, good to be here.
So before we get into and then we'll also be doing our regular top tips questions and live interaction questions from the audience. We're going to be doing that as we go along today. So send your tips and so on in. Slides are available from our chat room. Got a large number of people not logged into the chat room today. So if you want to get hold of a copy of the slides, it's on this link, callcenterhelper.com/chat. And you can leave your tips in there. And this is what the chat room looks like. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can download the webinar slides from there. We're going to be conducting our tips and questions. If you'd like to use the hashtag tip for a tip, and #question for a question, so we can just see whether you've got a question or a tip, we can pull those out and have them later. And you can also download the chat log from this box here on the right-hand side at the end of the webinar if you want to see a whole lot. Got a number of people joining in. Alexander's calling in from Ottawa in Canada. Haj is calling in from West, and we've also got Neris calling in from Newport. So I think I may have spoken to maybe the Neris I spoke on to on the phone yesterday. So welcome to you, Neris. So question for you, if you'd like to put this into the chat room, which is callcenterhelper.com/chat. And I'd like to understand, what telephone numbers do you use for customer service? These do vary between countries. So do you use regular telephone numbers? Do you use some sort of managed number, like a free phone number, an 0800 number? Do you use 0845, 0844? These are local call rate numbers, or some form of managed or even premium rate numbers. So if you'd like to just pop those in as we're talking through, we'll see what numbers they are. And also on the subject of numbers, would like to ask, do you have a one number strategy? A strategy that's effectively where you have one number rather than a whole range of different numbers. So let's have a look at some of the responses coming in. Matthew uses 0800 and 087. Robert uses regular numbers. Mo's using 0845. Kim, regular numbers, mobile specific numbers, as well as 0800. A is using 0808, which I think is a free phone number, I believe. 0845 is Ruth and Heather. Alex using regular numbers. Kevin, an 800 number, that's toll free. Joe's using a combination of regular 0845 and 0800. Sharon uses geographic numbers, 2 numbers, one for sales and one for customer service. Joe's using 0845 for customer service. There's quite a range here. Ruth's using quite a different numbers. Susie 0800, 0300, Ada 0500. I think that may be a free number. And a combination, so Ruta's using regular numbers, Martin regular numbers for customer service, and 0800 free phone for sales.
What a surprise!
What does that say to our loyal customers? Thomas is using a mix of 0800 and regular, and Andrew an 0131, which is an Edinburgh international number for people to dial in. So, Mike, quite a range of phone numbers there.
Certainly, yes. It's certainly a topical subject, the numbers and the numbering strategies that people use, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of evolve, if you like, going forward. I think certainly the internet is doing quite a lot to change the way we've been handling lots of customer service. So we might see some changes, if you like, in the way people do numbers.
And Paul, what's your view on one number strategy for?
I think it's brilliant, but obviously you've got to have the right technology behind it. But you know, the customers out there in the marketplace, very many, a lot of them, if they want to call into energy companies or holiday companies or whatever, you know, can be old or not be able to remember numbers. And the trouble is, with the enormous number of mail shots that go out with all different numbers on, no one has any idea. Now, maybe that's deliberate. Maybe you're confusing it to a point where you can't find out how to complain. I mean, the famous one about Amazon not having a phone number on it for the first few years, so that you couldn't actually get in touch with them and have a complaint. I think your point, though, Mike, is even more valid. I don't think people, up until very recently, have even had a strategy. They've basically said, this is the phone number of the company, and they've used it. Or they've said, we'll go the 0800 or the other strategy. But it hasn't really been a planned strategy, because the technology has almost been remote from the telephone system. And now that it's possible to integrate these things across the platforms, I think there's going to be quite a lot more interest in getting it right, hopefully for the customer's point of view, rather than being an extra profit center.
Yeah, and also just for the audience, a reminder that there is also a change in regulation coming through, that coming up from June of this year is the Consumer Contract Information Cancellation and Additional Charges Regulations in the UK. That's quite a mouthful, easier to look up than it is to say. This is also a European directive, so effectively a variation of this rule applies across the whole of the European Union. And that, in the UK case, Regulation 41 provides that where a trader operates a telephone number for consumers to contact them, the consumer must not be bound to pay more than the basic rate for such telephone calls. So it effectively spells the end for 0845, 0844, 0870, 0871 and premium rate numbers in the UK for customer service. So you can still use that on a sales line ahead of a contractual arrangement with the customer. Mike, this has been on the books for about 6 months. Have you seen much activity of people changing their numbers out?
Yes, I have. I've actually seen some examples really where customers have, like Paul suggested, just gone back to the drawing board and thought, well, what is our number strategy? And when they thought about it, they actually came back and thought, well, just a regular telephone number would be perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
Published on my website, it's very easy to reach and find, unlike the Amazon example. And from that, then there was no, it was a very sort of short conversation really to go that way. And they feel, as a brand, it's the right sort of tariff, if you like, for the customer to contact them for customer service. I think in a way the 0844s and the 087s have been abused, I think, in the past, haven't they? And there's quite a lot of pain out there in the consumer space, and really some pent-up frustrations really as to why am I paying such a lot of money for customer service that's you're keeping me on hold for a long time, and I'm actually paying for the privilege of getting through to somebody who's actually paid. Yeah, it's quite unsettling.
So it'd be interesting in the audience to see if you've actually ever had a thought about your telephone numbers, and I'd be interested to know, did you know this regulation exists across the European Union or is about to exist, and have you got plans to change your numbers as a result? So quite fascinating insight there into telephone numbers. Does vary somewhat across the world, but that is going to have some quite significant changes in the UK and the European Union. Right, well, we're going to go across and we're going to have a look at some of the strategies so far. So we're counting down from the top 10, so I'm just going to pass the baton across to Paul Cooper. And Paul, if you'd like to remind us of the top 10 strategies so far.
Yes, thank you, Jonty. And I think even before I do that, what I'd like to just say is I've seen a lot of these things, obviously turn of the year, a lot of people are talking about strategies. What we tried to do last time, and we're going to try to do again today, is really go right to the top of this. We're talking about major strategies. We're talking about taking the opportunity to get out of the day-to-day business and the little things that can be happening every day in a call center, and really step back and look at it as a whole and see where are we with this? When was the last time we looked at some of these really major issues? So the previous 5, we had at number 10 fun and morale, and that was mainly visiting What do you do to have fun, and how do you keep morale up? Is it getting a bit stale? Would the staff prefer to do things in a different way? The next one was do all channels well, and of course that includes new social media stuff, as well as all the way back to written letters and telephones and those sorts of things. So covering 360, the whole possibilities of contacts with you. Number 8 was, I think, extremely important because looking at staff development, and particularly your development, self-development, very often we're all very busy, we do things, and we realize actually we haven't ourselves kept up to date with what's going on, and there are a lot of external and internal courses available that people should do and don't get around to them. So just have a little visit to that. It means that the career paths can be improved, and it means that you develop your own people better. Number 7 was bang the drum internally. Very often I hear call centers are considered to be almost outside. They're just down the road and have really very little physical contact with the rest of the departments. So tell everybody when you do things right. Tell everybody what you need from them. Tell everybody when you're successful, say if you win an award or those sorts of things. That way you'll involve the other areas and they'll understand the importance, and in fact the key importance, of the contact center. And then number 6 was performance. Always looking at the way we measure performance. Are we doing it just to satisfy the bosses, or are we doing it to do things that we can learn from? Are the KPIs relevant? When were they last looked at? Do you have any input in them? And those sorts of things. So that was the 5 we had last month, and now we'll take you through the next 5. Back to you, John.
Yeah, just a reminder that on the top 10, if you go callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars, you can see the last week's, or the one we did 3 weeks ago, and later on this afternoon you'll also be able to see today's one as well if you want to share it with your team. So we're on to the top 5 countdown. Paul, so if you'd like to share with us, what have you got in at number 5?
Right, number 5 is maximizing staff feedback. Feedback is very important from everybody, but I thought we'd start with the staff one, and these are the issues. Do you hold regular review focus groups with staff and colleagues for feedback? Are they a telling or a listening forum? Have they become something where all you're really doing is passing on the information that you get or the things that you're supposed to tell your staff? Or are they listening to things that could actually improve the performance of your day-to-day operations? Are they still fresh and looked forward to? Do people come in the morning, especially if they're one of those ones that they have right at the beginning, are they looking forward to those? Or is it just an imposition on their day? Are they still focused on today's issues? When were they last looked at? When were they last looked to reflect what's actually going on? And finally, when you do get the opinions back and the comments back from things like focus groups or suggestion schemes or anything, are they then shared? Because not only do people like to make comments, they like to know that you've listened to them and preferably acted on them. And in that way, they'll give you more. If they don't hear anything again, they'll stop doing it. So we're going to have a poll now, and that's it. Back to you, John T. How do you collect staff feedback?
Okay, we're going to have a look at how you collect staff feedback, and we'll just put the poll up on the screen now. The answers are through an annual survey, through the intranet site, through a regular focus group, through a suggestion scheme, or through social media or a Facebook group. So if you'd just like to vote on that. Paul, focus group is quite an interesting one, because the one thing I've often found is that the one thing a focus group does is almost anything but focus on the...
Yeah, I think so. I think what you've got to do is make sure they're led, and I think the topic there should be perhaps a topic each week set as a mini agenda. You don't have to go to print them all out, but otherwise, yeah, it either becomes a moaning forum or it becomes, as I said earlier, a telling forum. But these are the ways that you can learn. Staff know what's wrong with the system and wrong with the company before customers do. And particularly if they're process issues, getting them out into the air so that people share them and say, yes, absolutely, I think it's very important. That's an interesting result.
So we've got 80% have an annual survey,
Good.
53% regular focus groups, 33% suggestion stream, 20% through an intranet site, or 5% through social media or a Facebook group.
I'm a bit disappointed about the suggestion scheme because they're so cheap to put in, and they can be run on the intranet, so you could link the two things.
Indeed.
But people, when you talk to people in call centres, and I do that all the time when I go around and do my audits, they've always got a suggestion. Pretty much every day when they come in, there's something that could just be logged. They get it off their mind and download it. So I'm a bit disappointed with that. But I am pleased that 80% do annual surveys because that's a wider picture. That gives you a good picture of the company.
I guess, Mike, the worrying thing with an annual survey, if it's only annual, that's not exactly a particularly regular pulse on the...
That's absolutely right, yeah.
But then don't forget that you should have like your more regular sort of coaching sessions with your agent staff, that's for sure. And that should be happening, if not every 2 weeks, then every month. And from that, then supervisor level should be able to pick up some good feedback from the agent team.
Okay, well,
yeah, I mean the problem, is with an annual survey, particularly if you're in a company with a few problems, and they've got a 40% headcount turnover, is that in a year's time, 40% of the people are going to be new.
Yeah. Right. Well, let's go across and have a look at some of the comments that are coming back from our audience. And so we've got a couple of tips or questions that have come through. So Kim has said, we have a staff survey group which works on all the actions from the survey.
Excellent.
Susie says they use daily team.
Yes, terrific.
The feedback. That is really good, really.
I like daily team hubs.
That's great. Sarah,
same thing.
Same thing. A morning scrum. Sounds a little bit more tense than a hug.
That looks good.
And
just depends which shape your balls are.
Daily buzz meeting from
same thing.
And Neris using intranet and suggestion boxes.
Everybody should do that.
There's a few more coming on there. So some quite good stuff there on staff feedback. So we're now going to go across and have a look. And Paul, what's the next on your list, on your countdown, number 4?
Number 4 is, as you might expect, maximising customer feedback. Customer feedback and staff feedback of all kinds. There we go. Maximising customer feedback. It's very difficult to say whether customers are more important than staff, because personally I think they're equally important, and a lot of organisations don't give enough credit or importance to their staff. But there's no doubt that customer feedback is where you can really learn, because that's where the impact is felt the most. And so let's just look through this one, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on it. I think Mike's going to contribute some stuff to this too. Should you review survey questions? Presumably you do a customer survey, right? On the basis that you do some sort of customer survey. Should you review the survey questions to reflect customer views as opposed to cosmetic issues? I'll give you the example there primarily of hotels. Those silly little forms that you find in hotel rooms where all of them are really cosmetic issues. Was it clean? Was this, was that there? That's the answers they want to know. They don't ask, well, was the room big enough in the first place? Or did I have to walk 5,000 miles to get to my room? And when I got there with a plastic key, it didn't work in the lock. Oh, I could go on. Anyway, are other departments involved in the survey to ensure their needs are covered too? I think it's incredibly important that we reflect some of the answers that would involve other departments in customers, because very often, if you don't, those departments don't even feel as if they've got a voice to the customer. Similarly, however, does another department do the survey without your input? I've come across some call centres where, unfortunately, some other department, whether it's marketing or even personnel in one case, was horrifically enough, where they do it and it doesn't really listen to the questions that should be asked by the call centre. And I think that's awful. And as a result, of course, the survey answers come in very late and you can't really act on them. And the last one is that very point. Well, once you've got everything in, do you act on results? Do you get them instantly and get something going? Now, the point I'm really trying to make here to bring it all together is doing a regular, say, annual or quarterly survey is all well and good. But if you have a system where you could get instant response, if you have a system where you could get stuff very, very fast on particular customers, and the fact that it's constant and consistent would not only give you better results, it would give you quicker results, and you'd be able to monitor trends much more quickly. So I think on that point, Mike, over to you.
Indeed, yes, that's a very nice intro for me. Thank you very much. So for those of you that have seen an interactive intelligence sort of webinar before, you recognize this sort of summary of what we do as a software company. And it just shows the capability that we have developed over time. But if you look at the left side of the plot face, you'll see the sort of what we call the interaction handling functions, things like inbound, ACD, IVR, multi-channel, etc. And then on the right-hand side, you sort of see the tools that we use for measuring people, sort of like measuring and managing and sort of like developing your people as well. So we'll kind of discuss that later on, but just specifically on the survey tool, if we think about the feedback, we're going to use parts of the survey tool, we're going to use process automation, and what we found as well with customers, they're also using the real-time speech analytics tool. What they're able to, if you can remember the, I think it was in the strategy number 6 in the last webinar, we kind of talked about this sort of what's called business manager application, where we were able to bring all the performance measurement devices into one screen for the supervisors and for the managers. So again, it's within that same screen that we have our interaction feedback tool. And our feedback tool really is just the place where you have full control really over who gets surveyed and how often they get surveyed. It's also got some nice reports, real time, to say how we're doing at this moment. Are we getting some good take-up of our surveys? But it also then has got the historical reporting to sort of let you know how you're doing compared to yesterday or last week or last month, as the case may be. But as you can see there, the CFI group being mentioned, that's quite a nice sort of template that we've incorporated into the application, which really sort of, it kind of builds on Paul's question earlier about revisiting the questions that you're asking, because these guys specialize specifically on questions for customer satisfaction feedback. And from that perspective, we've been able to take their knowledge really and incorporate it into pre-built templates. So when you get the application and deploy it, you can very quickly launch it and start getting some very useful feedback as to how your customers feel. So that's very much the feedback tool itself, sort of gathering the data, and we like to do that sort of call by call or email by email. So we kind of offer it at that level, and whether or not we get a take-up obviously is often quite different. But certainly we can offer it at that level, which hopefully will give us a better chance to get some valuable return messages. So the other two little elements that I just talked about earlier were the speech analytics. So again, because we're listening to sort of every conversation in real time, we're very, very able to sort of spot trends or spot maybe like issues that may sort of bloom into bigger problems, and we can kind of spot those very early with the real-time speech analytics. So that's been quite helpful, and that kind of alerts the supervisor very quickly as to something that could become quite difficult if it's not actually dealt with promptly. But the second element really is more about this idea of proactive service recovery. And Paul mentioned about, okay, are we actually sharing the feedback with the wider organization, because it's not just feedback to the contact center itself, it's actually feedback to the wider business we're often getting. So from that perspective, with the automation tools, what we're able to do is sort of capture that information, collate the information into a logical sort of report for today, and then dispatch it across to the various departments in the organization so that they know that, okay, here's some feedback about my department coming from this kind of tool. And that starts to build this sort of closing the loop process, where if they are generating sort of negative customer feedback because of how they do logistics, then they know what to focus on to try and dissolve that amount of kind of customer complaints perhaps coming through about missing deliveries or not full deliveries, that kind of thing. So that combination of the survey tool, the process automation, and the real-time speech analytics, what we're seeing with customers is that's working very well as a nice sort of combination of functionality for them to meet those goals.
And certainly the speech analytics is particularly useful for being able to, if you're sort of aware of a problem, it can help you drill down into specific calls where that may be facing, and also get some sort of quantification of a sort of ad hoc problem that may be arising. For instance, in the case of the floods of certain couriers not being able to get through, and you can then start to take avoiding actions on that.
And of course, using that tool to pick out the words that would tend to suggest it's a complaint rather than some other sort of problem, and then prioritize it because it's a complaint.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
Excellent.
Well, we're going to jump across to a survey now, and this is one that Paul was quite interested in putting in. How involved are you in customer feedback? If you're not logged in, by the way, and you have a different answer, callcenterhelper.com/chat is where we're carrying on the discussion. But I'll just launch the poll up on your screen now. how involved are you in customer feedback? So tick all that apply. I get to set the get to design the survey or set the questions. It's done by another department. I regularly review the customer comments. These are often known as verbatims, the verbatim comments that people put in. I read every item of customer feedback that comes in, or we don't do regular customer surveys. So if you'd just like to vote on that one, I think it's going to be quite interesting to see what the results coming through. We've got just waiting for a couple more of you to vote on that one, and just see what comes up. I wouldn't even hazard a guess.
Other development, I think.
Which one comes up?
Oh,
okay.
Interesting.
Very
Interesting.
So what's fascinating is the biggest one there. I regularly review the customer comments coming back. Over half our audience done there.
Or 48% don't.
48% do. Well, perhaps they regularly review every item. So that is 30. So that might add up together. 31% get to design the survey, set the questions. That tends to infer it's sort of handling elsewhere.
I think historically it has always been, well, there's been a lot of organizations that tend to design it outside with the call center. I just think it's time to pass it over, because the problem is if it's designed by another department, they're asking the questions they want to ask, and they tend to again be these cosmetic questions. You know, how are we doing, rather than what's the issues and what are the problems. So I would encourage everyone that's in a position of power, or at least can get some information to the management team, please let us get involved. Okay, even if you don't design every word of it, let's review the questions. Let's find out what we need to know and do it regularly. I think that's incredibly important. The point about reviewing everyone, someone should.
Yes.
Someone should be. If your customer is prepared to spend time answering those questions, and even if you added them together, you'll only get 82. All these people are not getting answers. I mean, I worked for a very large car company who I won't name. Who used to do regular service surveys, and what I found out when the hard times came was that they used an external company to do it. But the only comments that they actually then baked into their feedback were the ones that were done in the numerical boxes.
Yeah.
Even though there were nice big boxes that said make this comment in words, nobody ever read them.
Yeah.
And that's just appalling.
In fact, Peter Massey was telling me that he, a consultant, he always fills out the box when it comes through saying, please contact me, I'd like to discuss this with you. You get to receive his first phone call. So always a bit of danger.
Or maybe you should offer up a bottle of champagne for it, like you guys do.
Right, let's have a look at some of the audience steps here. These are a couple on the previous topic, which was staff engagement. We have engagement ambassadors who are advisors and own a microsite on the internet. They allow our employees to present their feedback and suggestion, and also select a feedback option, face-to-face, email or text. Also, generic feedback is provided on large wall boards on a site called You Said, We Did.
Yeah, good. I like that. That's lovely.
Very, very much like
Yeah.
very similar to some of the things that are happening at when I visited the British Gas Contact Centre, which was very good. And Martin says we have morning kickstarts for the team to share experiences and learn performance of the department. Debrief meetings on Friday to get a feel for the week gone by. Share challenges and successes for real-time staff feedback. More for in-depth feedback surveys and focus groups.
That's terrific. I would ask a question. It's not a criticism, but I would ask a question. If you're a 24/7 organisation, how do we make sure that the people who are working at the weekends or are working outside those regular hours, how do we know how they get the same stuff? Because I have come across places where if you're a regular Monday to Friday person, you know everything, and if you're filling in or doing the night shift or the weekends, you never hear anything.
Yeah. So if anyone's working a 24/7 contact centre,
Or even home workers.
Yeah, share your experiences would be great. Right, let's have a look at some of the feedback tips. Harsh says our survey results are shared in a monthly management meeting, warts and all. It's then filtered by department, and they have to advise when the issue is resolved.
Yeah, good.
Great ownership there. We use survey verbatim and analytics, which is exactly what you were proposing, Mike, to report on positive and negative sentiment in all of our surveys. This is reported monthly to all in the company.
Super.
So yeah, great use of technology there. We've got a comment in from Sharon who's saying, I'm struggling to persuade management that customer involvement and feedback is a good thing.
Wow.
Paul, any advice for Sharon?
Yes, you can pick up my phone number and email address, and I'll come and tell them myself. But that's a very valid point. I mean, at this day and age, if people don't get the whole point about improving customer service comes from listening to customers and involving customers, they probably, therefore, as a result, don't listen to staff either.
No.
So I do share your problems, Sharon, and sympathise with it. I think it's keep trying is all I can say. It is incredibly important to know this stuff.
There is also a lot of evidence on some of the stuff. There was a book called The Loyalty Effect.
Yes.
Which is
that
actually that's what 20 years old, that book now, but does actually put a business case for customer loyalty in there, which I've actually built that for a number of companies in the past, and you could certainly see the financial returns on from improved customer loyalty.
Even the notion that the contact center is the sort of area where you get most contact with the customer, so like you're daily. And from that perspective, just to not be able to get support, if you like, to do some surveys in that area, where you know you're going to get some great feedback from your customers in that tool. It's
I would tend to say find a way to do it anyway. A bit of terrorism.
Keith uses customer councils comprising of your customers and customers who regularly use other companies. Can be very effective at keeping high-level members of the company engaged with the customer. This can be a session once a quarter that allows board or director level to meet with customers and hear the good and bad for themselves, as so often they can be left out of the loop.
Excellent.
In fact,
that's absolutely super.
Because often the only time when some of the very senior people get customer feedback is in the time they don't want that, which is the annual shareholders.
Yes, right. Yeah.
So if they could those focus groups, that's a good one.
It's a very, very good one. I would extend the point, however, to also say the danger with just sharing feedback information about the contact center and not about the whole company is that, say, the finance director or the IT director can almost feel as if they're not in the loop. You know, look what's happening down there. They're all the problem. So you need to make sure that there's a lot of feedback on things that are influenced by the finance department or things that are influenced by IT.
Yeah. I'll just take two more and then we'll get on to item 3 on our countdown. Sabera says, I sometimes interview the customers myself, and at times I personally go to
Excellent.
Yep, very good way of getting feedback. We also get daily emails on our Voice of Customer surveys, which give a top score and a bottom score.
Good.
As well as just the average. I think that's absolutely splendid.
Yeah, you know I hate averages.
So, right, so that's we're on the countdown now to the top 3. So if you'd like to pop your slides up, and we'll, what is number 3, Paul?
Number 3 on my list is measurement tools. We can't run away from it in the end. We need to talk about measuring performance and all of those sorts of things. But I still want to make sure that they are under the control or under the influence of the contact center rather than some remote area. So what I'm saying under measurement tools is, are the KPIs and other measurements still appropriate to meet your objectives? Very often I've seen KPIs that have got many, many, many numbers in them. But then somehow or other the objectives are then set from a completely different position. And I've also seen ones where there's so many that they can become flavor of the month. This month we want to incentivize this sector of the market or the other. People who are working on phones every day, people in contact centers, know how to get around to these things. So making sure that they're very appropriate is important. Then the very question, what are we trying to achieve with these measurements? Are we just measuring them for the sake of measuring them? Are we measuring them so that we can just tell the board what things are going on? We should be measuring all this stuff for 2 reasons only: to improve the performance of the organization and to learn what's wrong with the organization. Really, if it doesn't meet one of those 2 criteria, we really shouldn't be measuring it. Then there's the point about sending mixed messages to the staff. We've got to have some consistency there with staff that says, this is what we're really working for. That's the classic where the board comes out with a statement to shareholders saying that customer service is everything that we do, and then all of the internal reports are based upon profit and sales. And then does your team know why these things are being measured and the effects of them? I have been to many places where actually the people at the sharp end don't really know why things are being measured. The important thing is not that they're measured. The important thing is to know why they're being measured and then get to them. Missing targets. The issue about missing targets is about knowing why you missed the targets and the effect that has on the organization, not just measuring a 95% figure. But won't go into that one again. That's another whole webinar. Mike, over to you.
No, indeed, and as I'm sure everybody would expect, this is quite an important topic for me, really. Certainly on the measurement front, like we kind of showed this graphic earlier. So the items on the right, from speech analytics around to recording, really are all about measurement. And just one thing that's quite important to understand about this slide, really, is that when I talk about these functions, as you can see in the whole clock face, these are functions which we have coded, as a software company over 20 years. So, our workforce management is very strong, the speech analytics is very strong, and we've actually done this deliberately. And what you'll see, if you like, and hopefully it can come across, is the reason we've done this is to actually get the right data from these tools. Because more often what we're seeing is customers are wrestling with, individual vendors providing these sort of items as little pieces, individual pieces. But the actual data I need to actually improve my people, to help them develop, to help them grow, isn't coming across correctly, and often it's actually conflicting. So what we've done is we've kind of built this suite of individual applications, and they're all very much built around measuring the sort of the applications, measuring the people, and making sure I'm encouraging and coaching my person to develop correctly. They all have the same look and feel, so they kind of are very easy to pick from one to the other. But most importantly, they all have a single common database. So therefore, I'm not messing around with multiple systems and trying to patch information together to get me some good, benchmarking results or scorecards that I'm publishing, even to the point where my management summary of a management team, where I've got maybe 6 or 7 or even 20 or 30 I've seen in my experience, guys who just crunch reports from multiple systems to try and create this sort of business intelligence data. So what I'm saying really is those kind of, the consequence of the older technology really are the problems that we sort of see here. And what we find now with the next generation is that you have, all-in-one type applications. You can get your information quickly. You're not actually, the operating costs are very low, but if you will, the worry-free point is very important, because I don't have to worry about, am I actually interpreting this information correctly? Is it telling me the actual real situation in my contact center? Is it actually showing me that Mike has improved or actually has not improved last week, last month, last quarter? And what we're finding is, because we have clarity in the information, then we start to get clarity, if you will, on those type of questions, which is very important, because you're talking about developing your people, and they feel that they need to have a career with your organization, and therefore we must act on good, hard facts. So that's what I believe is the kind of benefit of this type of approach to lots and lots of measurement tools, but all done very consistently and very concisely. So, Jonty, I'm going to hand back over to you.
Okay, indeed. Yeah, so we're going to take a quick look at some of the feedback from the audience, and we'll pop that up onto the screen. So in the previous surveys, Mark has made comment, reviewing the survey is important, but perhaps equally important is the follow-up with the customer and support technician.
Absolutely.
Because when there was bad experience, try to turn it around, and when there was good experience from the support technicians, give them recognition. I know certainly a number of call centers where if there's a negative net promoter score, there's a call straight back to the customer. There's anything that's done to recover that.
And you end up with a better customer, a more loyal customer if you do it right. No doubt about it.
And on the subject of surveys, make sure you survey your self-service as well, because that's often one that
absolutely, yes,
left out to dry. So measurement. So Farah said, my main issue with KPIs is being able to measure the quality of work.
I agree, and the same with all those issues that are, if you like, touchy-feely or qualitative, and you can really only do that over time with genuine feedback of what a customer thinks of you.
Jim says, as well as KPI measurement, to really understand if they're effective, the key is to keep close to the work as a manager, making sure you spend time seeing the work for yourself. It's very easy to get lost behind the dashboard.
That's right, I agree.
And not involved at at the front line making some influence over it.
Yeah, it's getting away from this whole thing about trying to catch people doing things wrong.
Yeah.
What we need to do is catch people doing things right.
Yeah.
And telling them when they're doing things right, or molding and coaching.
Yeah.
Incredibly important.
It very ties into Kim's comment. We coach for quality using a framework, but we don't measure or score it.
Good.
We don't beat people up as
Well, to me, that means there's confidence in the system. That you don't have to measure it because you trust the management to know when it's good and when it's bad.
Okay, well, we're counting down in time. We're down to number 2 on the on our list. So, Paul, what's coming in at number 2?
Number 2 is coming in with recruitment practices. Now, in truth, 1 and 2 could almost be interchangeable, but I wanted to work on 1 because we've all had very big cases of what's going to be number 1 in our own businesses. But recruitment practices, slightly different way of approaching this, because to me, not enough involvement is put in, and not enough time and energy is put in getting the right people in the first place, giving them all of the training that they require, and actually trying to find ways to nail their feet to the floor. Because otherwise we have massively high turnover, we have low staff morale, and all the things that go with that. So let's have a look at the chart. The first point is, as a contact center manager or a supervisor or whatever, are you involved enough in the process? Do you talk to all the levers and learn from it so that we can change something or change the way we recruit people? Do you ask the right customer service questions at interviews? So many times people will say, right, I want to get people into customer service, and they spend all their time looking at what the people have done in previous jobs. The right customer service questions are things like, do you know what good customer service looks like? Can you give us examples when you have experienced great service or poor service? That's the sort of thing that needs to be asked. And the classic one, of course, in a call center, do you actually interview them over the phone rather than face-to-face? Because if they're going to spend 90% of their lives on a phone, you really need to know what their telephone manner is like. Do you have a comprehensive induction program? Up to 6 weeks, more than that sometimes, to make sure that these people are ready before they go on the floor. And when was that last reviewed by you to look for appropriateness? I did some work with a call center not very long ago, and I actually looked at all the induction material and then took the contact center management through it, and at least, I don't want to over-exaggerate, 20% of everything that was in the induction binder, people weren't doing anymore. Things had changed, they'd moved on, and yet no one had told the poor trainers, and no one had liaised between the two areas. Just a terrible waste of effort on all parts. And the most important thing in the end from the induction program is, are the people who are then going to come out of that on a Friday to go to live work on a Monday really sure that they know what the job is all about? Or are they going to get the shock of their lives when they actually go live? So to me, recruitment practice is an incredibly important point. Back to you, Jonty.
Okay, well, we're going to drill down on that last question about the induction program. I'm going to ask a question, if you could put the answers into the chat box. And the question is, when did you last review your induction program? So if you could be honest on this, when did you last review your induction program? Kim says we go from training into an academy, which supports a move on the floor. Harch says our interview process is quite involved. We have designate recruited who conducts the first shift. Once this has been passed, they're interviewed by myself and one of my supervisors. Part of it is phone role play with limiting situations to get imitating situations to get daily. Our reduction is then 4 weeks on and off. So where did you last review your program? Heather, in January, when we had our most recent intake of staff. Hats off to Heather.
Good, absolutely.
Liz says within the last 6 months, and we lengthened classroom buddy time in the call center. Malu, last month when we received a new team members. Ruth says we are currently reviewing our induction program, and Annette says the end of the last quarter. Andrew, before every intake. So about 6 people on the call, so I'm guessing we've got over 130 people. then who haven't reviewed their induction program. But those who haven't, shame on you, and I think that's your first thing to do in either this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
It's one of those things which is really big. I mean, I could, again, take more time on it, but are the trainers the right people? Are they ex-contact center people, so they've actually worked out there? I mean, I've got a little bit of time for HR, but they're not the people to be doing the interviews into your area. It's you that knows what the profile of the people is. By all means, let them help with the recruitment and the advertising and things like that, and even maybe one of them sit in to make sure that the people are suitable for the organization. But in the end, if you don't do it, then you have every right to say, well, this person was chosen by the company and they're not suitable. If you do it, then the buck stops at you.
Okay, so we're just on to the countdown now. I'll keep the slides on mine for the time being. So we're down to number 1 of our top strategies. We need a drum roll coming through now. So Paul, what you have is number 1.
Right, number one is audit system. Now, you could say, oh no, it's not, is it? Not again. But I have to say, I've done webinar after webinar for John T. I do all these trips out to contact centers, judging of awards and things, and I'm not alone. I think we did a webinar about 6 months ago, John T., when more than 50% of the people who were in the audience at that time said the key reason why we don't maximize performance in our contact center was because the system was too slow.
Well, let's jump across to a poll, and we can put that to the test live as we speak. And we're going to ask you, what are your system challenges? Is your systems too slow? Do you have too many crashes? Or technology holds you back? So just like to vote on that now. The answer is too slow, too many crashes, technology holds us back. Do you think too slow or too many crashes? Which one do you think is going to be more common?
I think too slow is definitely going to be it.
Yeah, or maybe holding us back might be one which is would be common. I think there's so much complexity.
You'd have to say all three.
But yeah.
In 90% of the cases.
Okay, well let's have a look at the results.
There we are. Well, we're nearly up to the 50% on too slow.
So too slow, 45%. Too many crashes, 23%. Technology holding us back.
Wow.
71%.
Look at that.
So if you're wondering about why it was, we had a big, long debate about this, about number 1, audit system. I think that's your rationale there. So.
It's become a hobby horse as well for me.
So if you've got any comments about your technology, if you'd like to put them into the chat room. So if we can then pass back to you, Paul, and give your advice on how we can start to look at system challenges.
Okay. Well, where are we? There we are. Right. Well, so the first one is it too slow? And I just wanted to go through this because there's one organization I know where they've got so used to it being too slow that they actually use the pauses and the slowness of the machine to actually improve their CRM information and get more information about the customer. The classic one, well, what's the weather like where you are, becomes actually a way of completing the CRM information, which is fine. And if they're big ticket items and you have very loyal customers, then by all means. But we can see through it. I'm sorry, but every time somebody asks me that question, I usually say to them, does that mean your system's too slow again? It is just out there all the time. The second one, are unfixed errors costing you time and morale? What I mean there is that there's always little niggly bits going on with the system. But if the answer is, well, IT will add it to their list and you'll get it in 2 years' time, how can you build morale with a technology-wise set of employees who have iPads and who are on the intranet, who have smartphones, where none of this stuff ever happens at home? You don't have spelling mistakes. You don't have things that crash the system. We just don't get that anymore in our domestic home lives. So why are we getting it in the sophisticated company that we work for? The third one, are you blaming staff for what's actually a systems problem? See this time and time and time again. And are you looking at or utilizing fully the innovations in the market, like cloud, like speech analytics, like interactive recordings? You see, if you're not, then what you're really doing, or you're allowing IT to do, is you're just putting a sticking plaster on it. for the next time and complicating it and making it worse. Now, I know somebody that can answer this a hell of a lot better than I can, and that might be Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I mean, that's the real sort of common situation that we find where people just put a little, like, let's bring in some speech analytics, or let's bring in some quality management, or let's bring in some mobility, and just sort of add another sort of layer, if you will, of complexity onto an already sort of complex situation. But I think what our customers are telling us really is that the cloud is probably the most important development in the contact center space for easily a decade, really, because what they feel is that it allows them to focus on what's important for them, really, which is their customers. And they don't have to start worrying about, or they can stop, if you like, worrying about the technology and getting things to work together correctly, or getting the vendor to actually listen to them in the first place without having to pay a bill for that privilege, or even things like it takes so long for a change to be invoked that the actual reason for it to change is kind of gone past. And what I hear and what these customers tell me is that this happens over and over again, and it's just, this kind of leads to the appalling service that sometimes we're sort of getting, and hence the Scottish Herald statistics don't really surprise me, really. But I think the idea of the appetite, if you like, that customers have for this functionality is very, very great. And often what they find is the way to get to that is just too complex. So what we've been thinking about really is, well, how can we sort of allow our customers to consume the functionality easier? So this notion, if you will, of tiered services has become very popular. And from that, then, customers can choose like an entry which is appropriate for them and utilize the functionality, and if you like, pay for the functionality which is appropriate for them. But what you see is it's all becoming very simple. It's straightforward. Because it's in software, we either switch it on or switch it off, depending upon the tariff that the customer wishes to pay. And what we also find then is that the customers really, what they're looking for is a true measurable value. And this is really where I think a lot of the contact centers that are out there, especially with the older technologies, kind of get lost very quickly. What we're finding is that contact centers these days have to become a contribution to the business. They can no longer be looked on as a sort of everlasting cost center. And if that's how it's run in your organization, then I'm sorry, but it's kind of, things aren't going in the right direction. We've got to get it turned around and focus more about how can I get this area where I touch most customers than any other part of my business. The contact center is where we touch most of our customers every single day. Why can't I be looking at that as an opportunity to be growing my business and growing my profitability, not growing my cost base? So what we find really is that customers are looking for someone to trust, both for providing a service that's kind of secure and reliable. They're looking for a provider who's like proven and actually got some good experience. Yes, they want that sort of rich clock face, if you like, a functionality that we talked about earlier already. But also, because we're in the contact center space, we need maximum flexibility because, as in the contact center, things change. They're always changing. So from that perspective, just a little statistic that we kind of picked up from our own sort of annual results that were announced a week ago. In 2013, our cloud-based orders were actually up 87% over 2012. Okay, so 87% increase in cloud-based orders. And that really tells me that customers have an appetite for this type of approach to solving the sort of tactical problems. They are going strategic. They're saying, right, enough's enough. I can't work with my vendor, or I can't work with this plethora of little bits of technology. I've got to deal with this once and for all. And with that kind of take-up, if you will, of customers in what we're offering, you can kind of see that wholesale change in their mind was the right thing to do. So just to kind of leave you with that message, really think about that, because at the end of the day, more sticking plasters, like Paul mentioned, ain't going to solve the problem. You've got to get to the root of the problem and fix it in the core. So, John T.
So I guess that really all leads on to really putting together a business case from a technology perspective.
Quite right. Absolutely, and addressing the legacy issues all in one batch.
And if anyone needs any help putting together a business case, where do you think they could go?
I mean, that's the basis of pretty much every bid that we estimate these days. So like the first entry point after discovery really is to turn that information that we found into a business case. But the nice thing is, if you like, the reach of that now goes far beyond just the contact center. Because it's cloud-based, we're taking responsibility for technical machinery like servers and data centers and that kind of thing. The customer can just focus on, well, where do I get my functionality to help me do a great job for my customers? Yeah, that's what's really important.
So there's been really quite a sea change from where
absolutely
the Tim.
Yeah, I
it's now a managed service, so it's in our best interest
And also what we found as well is that their IT departments have actually been sort of eroded quite vigorously over time. So they don't necessarily have that sort of capability anymore to kind of do this themselves. They're hungry for a vendor to actually take all this away from my operations and help me sort of work better.
And by definition, of course, you're always up to date.
Correct. Well, that becomes my responsibility. So from that, they can sort of let me worry about that and not them.
Well, I guess there's quite a number of people in the audience feeling the pain of some of the technology. Let's look at how some of the opinions that our audience have come back.
Yeah.
Lack of system integration is definitely an issue. In today's world, we should not have to make the same update in multiple systems.
Right.
The Alt-Tab method of integration it's not the best.
But it's so common, Jonty. It's so common.
And indeed, same with Sharon here. Business struggling with legacy systems that don't talk to one another. But lack of accurate metrics also creates a problem, defining the future as well. Lisa says the cost of technology is a restraint and often means we have to create manual workarounds to continue to offer what customers need. From what I understand, Mike, cloud is starting to change this entry level, isn't it?
It really is, because you basically pay for what you use. So from that perspective, like I say, walk before you run. So if you don't need the sort of like the top level of sophistication, or maybe you only need to have it in the pocket of your operation, you can deploy just that and pay for it on a monthly basis. So you get a lot more flexibility with those tier examples that we showed, but also then even down to like a specific function. I'll just have speech analytics for these guys. I've got a customer who actually uses it for their home workers because they'd like to have a added visibility of what the home worker is actually doing. So the speech analytics is a nice comfort for them to hear what's actually being said by the customer and the home worker. And any alerts that are popped up are kind of instantly visible.
So stuff is sort of priced per agent, so you can start off with a small trial and then build it up from there.
Correct.
See, Lisa makes a very good point there about manual workarounds. Very often, when you do create manual workarounds, they may actually be an improvement in the process. They may well be better, but because they are done manually and whatever, when you get to the eventual nirvana, utopia, whatever, then they're forgotten because they're not known about. And so what was a very clever idea of a workaround can be missed.
Anne-Marie says technology updates are long-term projects in my industry, and by the time it's implemented, it's behind the trend. That all ties into it.
You're not alone, Anne-Marie.
So, Kim says we've set the vision to include what we need the systems to do for us. Then all decisions are matched to that vision before. That's, I think, the right way that it should happen.
That's ideal.
Great when that comes together.
And it's got your customers should decide. Always your customers should decide what the vision is.
So a question from Andrew is: a fancy new system which is expensive going to produce enough financial return, or will it improve things only slightly and cost you in terms of profitability?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I disagree, Ollie.
I guess if you're building business cases, then...
Well, because you're paying for usage as well. I mean, I'm not involved in that side of the business, but it seems obvious to me that if you have what we've currently got, which is enormous cost every month regardless of efficiency, and that can be replaced by use it and pay for it in a direct relationship, that has to be more efficient.
Yeah. Madonna says, relating system issues back to customer impact helps the IT department to understand the urgency of the issue.
Yes, absolutely.
Detachment from IT.
Right.
So we need to just have a quick recap then of our top 10. So I've got those up on my screen here, Paul.
Okay.
So do you want to run through the top 10 very quickly?
I will just run through them, and I will remind everybody that you can get these downloaded. Right, number 10, if you remember, was fun and morale. Number 9 was do all channels well. Number 8, self and staff development, and I would say your own personal development is probably really, really important there. Bang the drum internally, make sure everybody realizes how important the contact center is. Look at your performance, make sure that that's being maximized. Maximize staff feedback, and then maximize customer feedback. Use all of the stuff that's there to improve processes. Look at the measurement tools, make sure they're relevant. Full review of recruitment practices so that you're getting the best people. Now is a really good time to get out there and hire the best people. And the last one, just get that system right, please. I've spent 10 years listening to people tell me how slow systems are and legacy is a problem. Well, you're not alone, we know that, but surely it's time now to turn the corner. So with that, over to you.
So what I'd like you to do is I'd like to put into the box, in one word, what was the best thing about today's webinar, and also if you could put in which strategy you are most likely to implement in your call center as a result of today's webinar. The strategies are available to watch on replay. That will be later on. You can watch last session we did, or this one will be on callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And you'll also be able to get a copy of the slides through that page as well. The replay is available. That's going to be on. You can get to that through the recorded webinars page, and that will be available later on this afternoon. Taking a break for 2 weeks. We're back in 3 weeks' time looking at customer effort. So just have a quick readout of some of the comments we've got from people. The most likely strategies, the staff feedback along with customer feedback, Charlotte's going to do. Susie, recruitment, using the right people. Sharon says it's insightful. Haj says engaging, and 9, do all the channels well. Tip focusing on recruitment and induction, seeing if everyone is at the right position. Emma says get involved and review customer satisfaction questions. And Tim, most valuable was the tips on recruitment. We're going to publish all of the results. They'll be up on Call Center Helper next week. And just like to say to our speakers, Paul Cooper, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
To Mike Murphy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jotty.
And to all of our audience, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again in 3 weeks' time. Thanks. Bye-bye.